So here's the challenge I'm faced with, other than the fact that it's a half-empty room. The challenge here is to keep everybody awake. We'll try and make this interesting with very, very simple quizzes throughout the next 15 minutes or so. I thought, we'll sort of wind it back a little. One of the challenges I gave myself was we won't use anything that is heavy, that is uninteresting or whatever else. So I sat down and first, started with a list of words I would not use in today's session. So I'm not going to use pedagogy, curriculum, and boards and stuff like that. What I really want to talk about is a couple of things. First, I want to talk about my family. Quick slide up there, that's my wife Sandhya, my daughter Zana, my son Kaiser. But really, and that slide is important and you'll later figure out why. I really wanted to talk about three things today, right? One was a very quick introduction to our organization and what we do and why we're here. The second, I just wanted to have a conversation, and hopefully it will get interactive at some point, around, what business are we really in? I mean, some of us run schools, vocational training centers, higher education institutes, publishing houses, what have you. The big question, I think, is across the world, especially in Asia, we are of the opinion that a lot of them are getting it wrong and handling core competencies wrong. And finally, hopefully, open up for 5 minutes of Q&A in the end. So quickly about the World Education Foundation and why we're here, what we do. Just a quick socio-cultural context. If you can see the circle on the right of the screen, and I'm sure some of you have seen this before, there are more people living inside that circle than outside it, which basically means Asia pretty much has more people living in it than the other, how many continents? Okay. So what's the right answer? Come on, we're educators. Okay. So who said 5? I'll give it to you. I don't know if that's the right answer. Right? So, and I think it becomes very, very important because for us, being a not-profit foundation, it becomes almost a matter of concern for us that most education investment, most education spend, most thought on education is coming in from the West. And unfortunately, we see organizations, funders, institutions assuming that you pick up a model from the West, replicate it in a cookie-cutter manner, and it's going to work. But we see it doesn't. And what we're largely here to do is to help governments and boards and schools in the K-12 segment really realize how the segment needs to evolve in this region. Right? Let me just show you another quick picture. The size of the golden color dot, is that a golden color? What color is it? What color is it? Okay, who said mustard? So the size of the mustard/golden circles is the relative number of schools that you have in each and every country. As you can see, India, China, Indonesia, Philippines are much bigger than, let's say, the UK. So each of the countries on the right of the screen are much bigger than a UK and Western Europe and the US put together, which makes you ask the question, how come most of the curriculum is coming in from there? How come most of the thought is coming in from there? And what does that mean for us to be based in India and have to deal with that context, right? The little red boxes there tell you organizations or agencies that are empowered to deliver excellence in K-12 education in each of those countries. And as you can see, there's a huge gap in most of Asia, and that's why when we started off with the World Education Foundation in the UK, said, look, there's enough of attraction here. Let's go and drive change where it's really needed. Just a quick overview of what we do. There's really three sets of mandates or focus that we have. One is through ratings and standardized testing of schools, not of students, of schools. We help provide transparency, which is hugely missing. Second is we tend to work with school systems and help with school improvement programs on stuff that is broken at a systemic level. And finally, there's a lot of capability building and there's a lot of building of traction around the changes that we are trying to bring in. As you can see, not to overpitch, but we're led really by the most senior leaders that you could find within K-12 education, whether it's a dean of education at Harvard, or whether it's James Tooley, whose book I'm guessing some or most of you might have read, the former director of IIM Ahmedabad and what have you. But I think the large part of what we do, so we engage with schools. The other part of what we do is to really work with organizations who are tasked with changing the lives of children who really do not have a context of how things work in other parts of the world. So you might have a United Nations body, usually filled at the top with Germans or Swiss or Americans, who really don't understand that you can have an unaided private school charging 500 rupees a month, which is less than $10 and still delivering a successful product. So that's a quick background and context, and I'm happy to talk to you more about it offline if you're interested. What I wanted to talk to you today was about what business are we really in? And let's throw out some answers. If I were to challenge you and say that you're not in the education business, you are in the dash business. I'm just trying to be provocative here. What business are you in? People business, very interesting. Service, very interesting. Knowledge. Learning business. Shaping futures business, okay. Qualification business. In the creating leaders business, okay. So lots of answers, but then this 5-star goes to me. There's no right answer so far. And we'll get to it. As Ryan was talking yesterday, patience is one of the biggest P's, right? I just want to talk about a simple example of Coca-Cola in the 1980s and how they went through asking the right question for them to grow exponentially as a company, right? So back in the 1980s, Coca-Cola was facing a very stagnant market share. Pepsi was really emerging as a strong rival for them. And at some point they realized that, hey, we're selling as much Coca-Cola as we can. What now? Roberto Guzieta, who was the CEO then, came up with this brilliant thought at some point and said, hey, we are really not in the we're really not in the Coca-Cola business or even the beverages business. We're in the business of share of stomach, right? So of our consumers, I mean, let's see how much our consumers are eating or drinking every day. How much of that is a Coca-Cola product? Doesn't matter if it's yogurt or a juice or just water or what have you. And that was a big aha moment for them, because that's when they realized they weren't selling fizzy drinks anymore. They were trying to capture your stomach. So what Coke then moved to was a single product, multiple positioning kind of a brand. And that's what their range of brands now look like, where Coca-Cola is a very small contributor to the overall bottom line than a lot of their other brands are. Let me just then try and extrapolate this example to what we face as educators. Coming up is a quick quiz question. The mountain that you see there is called Mount Sinabung. If you can see, the volcano has just sort of erupted. And in the forefront is my daughter. Does anyone remember what her name is? Who got that right? Perfect. So I will have this for you at the end. Thank you so much. So what happened? A few months back, I'm sure you guys heard, after a gap of 412 years, Mount Sinabung erupted and there was lava all over and all of that. And being the loving and caring parents that we are, we said, "Chalo, wahan chalte hain." And we landed up there with my daughter and my son. Um, and it was a very interesting experience because Zana kept asking me a lot of questions. How tall is the mountain? What is lava made up of? Was anyone sitting on the mountain? And a whole bunch of questions, right? And I said, look, I don't know. I mean, I'll have to check the internet and let you know. So after 10 minutes, she lost patience and she said, Papa, forget it. You don't know anything. I'll just ask Google, right? And while I didn't care too much about it, my wife and I had a conversation that evening. And, for those of you who know her, she's much more intelligent than I am, as most women usually are. And she said, Anuraag, you're losing relevance as a parent. You've got to keep up. And that got me thinking, I mean, kids are seriously very, very different from what we've been used to like 10 years, 15 years back, much less when we were kids ourselves. They're much more curious, much more argumentative. They have a lot of alternate tools, so the dependence on teachers and the role as teacher as a Gyan ka Shrot has become less relevant today. And this is, at the end of the day, a generation of attention gaps. How many SMSs do you receive from your kids that have vowels in them? I really doubt it. However, parents, boards, and schools haven't really caught on to that change, and I think it is time to. The big sort of controversial challenge that I think we face, and pardon me if I offend anybody in this room, is, parents largely are replaceable as sources of knowledge. There's the television, there's the internet, there's a whole bunch of other sources. Same goes for teachers, right? Books and libraries are replaceable by, iPads and it's not just technology, right? It's a whole bunch of information that hits you. Buildings and facilities, right? I heard someone, so when I said, what business are you in? Someone said infrastructure, right? Buildings are replaceable. I mean, learning happens does not necessarily need to happen in a cool looking building with a pool and a badminton court and what have you. So really the worst fears are coming true. If you think of the core strengths that players in the education industry had, it was these things. Hey, we have an awesome infrastructure, we have an awesome building, we have an awesome set of teachers. But hey, guess what? What if they suddenly turn irrelevant? And I think that's going to be our big challenge, right? So I ask you again, what business we are in. If it's not curriculum, if it's not, creating the future, if it is not infrastructure, if it is not learning, then what is it? Okay? Interesting answer. What else do we have? Sorry, there was some. Can you be a little louder, please? Yeah, no, sorry, I'm just trying to get the answer from the lady in red. World share. Okay, so sharing, okay, exposing children to worldviews. That's again a very interesting answer. Sorry? Facilitating. Okay. Really? My answer, not that it's the right answer, but because I'm up on stage and I hold the bowl of 5 stars. My belief, right, is really much more simpler, right? We're in the business of trust. We're in the business of creating trust. We're in the business of keeping it. Everything else is an ancillary, right? In my view, if you are running an education institute today, trust is what is going to differentiate you from your, well, people don't like the word competitor in this industry, but I love it. Trust is what is going to differentiate you from a competitor. In real terms, Google for me is a competitor today. I live in Singapore, which has an amazing library system. So the library system is a competitor to Google and to me, and I'm a competitor to all of them. So I think what we've got to do is redefine the question in our own mind, exactly like Coca-Cola did with what business are they in, to say, hey, what business are we really in, and who's really our competitor, right? So if I'm a source of learning today, my competitor need not be another traditional source of learning. It could be a library, it could be a Google. That's how you attract the best students, right? At the end of the day, this is an industry where the quality of your output takes 10 years or 12 years for a parent to really assess. Unlike most other industry where there is a quarter-to-quarter or a year-to-year mentality, there's no way for a parent to know if you're a good provider or not, other than having faith. And I mean, it's in its very construct, it's a very religious, faith-based kind of an approach that parents have to take. Unless there is trust, you don't obviously have the kind of investment that you might like to scale and grow. You obviously aren't able to charge the kind of fees. And positioning is really, really different. And I say this because I feel very passionately about this, right? There's a whole bunch of schools that are looking at unidimensional aspects of their school. Infrastructure comes to mind as an immediate example. I mean, there are people spending crores and crores of rupees and using that as the USP for their school. But is that the only positioning? Is that sustainable? Blah, blah, blah. So all I would like you to do is to think in terms of the sets of stakeholders you interact with. Children and parents are obviously the largest and the most important stakeholders, right? But you deal with boards, you deal with donors, funding organizations, you deal with media, just go through the list and get a realistic assessment of what your trust levels are within each of these sets of stakeholders. Now, here is, given that this is an education conference, it just makes sense for us to take home some homework. Here is the flip I want you guys to think about at whenever you can. Right? And let's assume that trust is the right answer for a second, right? Does your institution, and I don't mean you as an individual, does your institution really recognize what value, and put it down in rupee terms or what have you, what is the value of the trust my parents place on me as a principal or in my institution with so-and-so brand? Had the trust not been there, how would that change the valuation of my school? Right? Look at trust as any other asset. Like you have a plan to manage real estate, like you have a plan to manage media, like you have a plan to manage people, which again, in my mind, people would be the second biggest asset a school has after trust, perhaps arguably even bigger than trust. But just like you have a plan to manage your teachers and staff, your building, your any other resource that you deal with, do you really have a plan on, which talks about trust, how you will gain it, how you will, big question, right? What happens if people start trusting our brand a little more? More importantly, what happens if we lose our trust? How does that impact revenues? How does that impact, whether teachers want to join us or not? How does that impact the sustainability of the school? I mean, we've been seeing all sorts of incidents globally of children turning violent in schools and hurting other children, all kinds of abuse taking place, sometimes by the caregivers themselves, all kind of financial impropriety. And the big question each of us need to ask is, what happens if something like that happens to our school, right? What if a teacher goes rogue? What if our staff accountant runs away with a bunch of money and that turns into a police case? And I think you really need to think about the financial value of that reputational risk. What my parting take would be very, very simple. Look at trust as any other asset. Sit down and form a group that looks at trust as something that needs to be built, something that takes concrete steps, something that needs let's say a monthly review or quarterly review, and look at trust as you would look at any other asset of your school, because heck, at the end of the day, anyone can build a building, but you as an educator needs to build trust. And always remember, anyone can build a building bigger than yours, in a year's time. But building a trust that you have, a relationship with your stakeholders is something which takes much, much longer. With that, I guess we'll open it up to a quick couple of Q&As and then wind up. Any questions that anyone has? Sorry.
I'm Kiran Chawla from Bilaspur, Chhattisgarh, and we've been running a school for the last 10 years, and we look forward to build another school in the coming times. How can your organization help us assess our school's pulse? And what I'm talking is about the academic audit. So are you into something of that sort? How can you help me build that trust and evaluate my school that where it stands today? Thank you.
I think that's a very good question. So first things first, please sit down, sir. I'm the only one that needs to be punished after lunch. But on a serious note, now, I happen to be a chartered accountant by original training, and I don't like the word audit per se, because audit has a very post-mortem kind of a feel to it, right? That what has had to happen has happened. Let's now figure out what went wrong. But I like the sense, and let me congratulate you, because there are not many school leaders who even think of excellence as something they need to, they're very lost in day-to-day activities, right? Okay, कौन सा टीचर आया है, कौन सा टीचर नहीं आया है, अच्छा कौन से bills का payment बाकी है, and so on and so forth. तो CBSE को ये report भेजना है, kind of stuff. So it's very important to start thinking in terms of quality and what you could do about it. In terms of what we could do about it, it's pretty simple. We, as I'm sure you know, we have a school assessment and a school rating format, very similar to, let's say, a CRISIL kind of a thing for schools, where we go into a school, we sit down with them, we make them go through a very comprehensive assessment, and then say, okay, here is a report card. Exactly like Ofsted. In fact, if you go back to the set of directors that we had earlier, yes. So sorry, just to give context, because I'm not sure everyone heard the gentleman here. So Ofsted is the rating agency in the UK that rates all public schools in the UK, and a lot of what we do comes from learnings from there as well. So yeah, thank you, sir. Good question. So coming back, so we would run a school assessment and give you a rating and a report card. So the rating, for example, would help you communicate to parents how good your school is. I mean, a 3-star, 4-star, 5-star kind of stuff. But it's the report card which becomes more important, because very often one doesn't know how their school compares to a peer school. So yeah, that's how we would engage. Yeah, could you just say that again on the mic so everyone gets it?
Most of the UK schools have put the Ofsted report on their website. If you visit any UK school, you can just see the format and how it goes and have an idea about how good or bad a school is.
Absolutely. And I think dhire that kind of transparency is, we already see it coming into this part of the world. Beyond a point, choice is going to be driven by information rather than assumption. And we do it every day. I mean, I find it weird that, as an example, you make a 3-day trip to Goa, you want to find out how good or bad the hotel is before you go there, right? So you go on TripAdvisor, you go on Zagat and say, acha, it's a 3-star property, 4-star property, achhi hogi. But then you send your kid away for 10 years to a school just based on hearsay and market opinion. So I think some of that has got to change very soon. Any other questions, comments, thoughts? So I've either been a very effective speaker or a very boring one. Thank you so much.